Started. Good morning, everyone. I am Nicole, and welcome to today's PatternFly community meeting. Today we're going to get some updates from various teams working on PatternFly. I will sorry, I got a new computer recently, and I might not have permissions to actually share my screen with Blue Jeans. We'll have to see. But we do have a packed agenda, so please feel free to use the chat for real-time questions. But I will be recording this meeting and posting it to YouTube later today, and then I'll send out the recording and all the slides to the invite list. And hopefully, if we have time at the end, we can open it up for some questions too. But the first set of updates is going to come from the React team. And I'm supposed to present first. Let's see if I can get my screen sharing. If not, okay, I'm going to be right. I have to be right back, I think, so I might have to restart the recording too. I'm just going to come on and right back. Okay, that's all I needed to do. Let's see. And then let me share my screen. Yes. Oh, it's working. I'm sharing the screen. Okay, good. Phew. I'm sorry, everybody. Never know. You pray for as much as you can. Okay, so one of our recently released beta components is the code editor. It's built using Microsoft's open source Monaco editor, and it does require the consumer to configure it using Webpack. It comes with what's described as a rich IntelliSense and validation for TypeScript, JavaScript, CSS, Less, Sass, JSON, and HTML. And it also includes basic syntax highlighting for at least 21 other programming languages. Our component allows the consumer to control the display by doing things like toggling Monaco editor's default dark theme. You can see me do that. It also allows you to toggle line numbers, a read-only mode, and it also comes with a mini map that gives you a little preview to all the code in the editor at the time that you can toggle on and off if you'd like. The PatternFly code editor also allows the consumer to upload, download, and copy to clipboard the contents of the editor. And when enabling the upload control, there is a default empty state, which can be overridden. But here, once I upload some text, you can see some of the copy to clipboard, the upload, and the download controls all are visible. You can see I can copy the content to the clipboard. I can download it and put it into a local file with an extension that maps to whatever language is set to be configured. And the final example for this component includes a demonstration on how to enable a custom action. So if I begin putting some text into the editor, you'll see this execute code, which is a custom action that will, in this case, print the print the contents of the code editor into the console. So yeah, feel free to play with this beta component and please give us feedback. I will note that the development of this component was slightly atypical because we intentionally sought feedback throughout the process from OpenShift, since they hope to consume the component soon, and we wanted to make sure that our implementation met all their needs. And it definitely benefited the whole process to get their feedback immediately in real time, because we had to make a handful of design, API, and configuration decisions, like the requirement to use Webpack. We had to make those kind of on the fly, so making sure that all of our decisions would work with their setup was very important. So certainly any products who have a true vision for any particular components we're working on should feel free to follow the life of those components in the stories and epics so that we can take advantage of any input throughout the whole building process. We have a few, the PatternFly team is currently building components like Logger, and there were a lot of updates to the resizable drawer, which have been using a similar collaboration process, and I'm sure we'll present on soon. But getting like real-time feedback as we're developing, setting up meetings with products has been super helpful along the way. So I just wanted to highlight that. Another recently enhanced beta component is the search input. Now has an advanced search feature. This variant expects a list of attributes to be passed as props, which are used to build an advanced attribute value search form. So if you can toggle it open here, and you'll see that there's a username and first name attribute. So let's see, the user can fill out the form manually, and to manipulate, yeah, so I can fill the form manually, so I could change this name to some name. And it updates the search input in the field on the fly. And it also, I could also change things here, so I could change this first name to be, I don't know how to spell Jonathan. Yeah, you know what I mean. So you can see it changing on the fly. The search input, oh, and if I put a value in the search input that doesn't have an attribute assigned to it, you'll see it appears in the third has words field, which is basically for values that have no attribute associated with them. And also in the search input string, the delimiter used for associating attributes with values is something that's configurable. So I can demonstrate using an equal sign as a delimiter as opposed to a colon. In this variant, when the user clicks the search button, either this arrow search or there's a search button at the bottom of this form, it executes an onSearch event handler, which returns, provides the value, which is currently in the search input, the event that's firing, and an object, which is basically a map containing all of the attributes and values. So hopefully that meets the needs of people trying to build more complex searches. But we definitely would also love feedback on this component as well. I already foresee updates to some of the ways we parse this search string. So we would definitely be open to more suggestions. That's all I have. And I will now, I see a question in the chat that says, is it possible to remove the tab at the right top? That's the label indicating which language the code editor, I believe, is still being, it's currently configured to consume, and the answer is yes, that is something that you just pass a prop and it'll hide that if you don't want it. Okay, I will pass it over now to Amanda, which is Titani.
Hey, good morning. So the first component that I'll demo is the slider. So this is a new beta component that was added. So there are a few different variations of the slider. We have a discrete slider, and in that case, if you drag the thumb, it'll snap to the next value, the closest value. If I just move it back. And then there's also the continuous slider. Which just increments by 1 when you drag it right, and decrements the value by 1 when you drag it to the left, and there's a value of 0 to 100. And then you have the option of labeling of the points in the slider. You can leave them blank if you wish, but you can label the values on the slider. We also have the option of adding an input for entering the slider value. So for this first one, it's a discrete slider. Enter, let's say, 50. We'll snap to 8 because that's the closest value to 50. To 3, snap to 3. And then the same thing. The 25 is not labeled here, but it's snapped to 25. And then there's a continuous slider with an input. And you have the option of putting the value, the input field, on top of the thumb. And you can also add actions to be in front of the slider or after the slider. So in this case, we have an example where we added a minus and a plus, so you can increment and decrement the slider value that way. Of course, you can still drag it. And then this example just shows an action after the input, where this button is will disable the input. That's pretty much all the functionality of the slider right now. And again, it's a beta component. So if you have any feedback, please provide feedback. We're already starting to get some issues in on this with some suggestions on improving the API. Okay, and then the next thing I have to demo is the form select. We added an enhancement so that when you have a placeholder, the styling will be different for the placeholder item. So in this case, choose a number as a placeholder. So styling is different than if I had chosen a valid input value. So in order to make an item a placeholder, you just apply the prop to the item is placeholder. So that's true. And that's it. Any questions about that? All right, thank you.
Great. We will now pass it on to Zack for some more React updates.
Oh boy. Well, can you guys hear the, oh, my mic has been muted. My mic's been unmuted. Can you guys hear this crying dog? If so,
Not too much.
Okay.
You think you're okay?
Hopefully it's quiet enough for you guys to hear me. It's annoying.
Poor
We
dog.
just started like 2 seconds ago too, right before this presentation. Very convenient timing. All right, so I'm here to tell you guys about our Jumplinks demo, which is new and improved. So the wonderful Michael Coker gave us a new layout called sidebar. And so this allows us to put things in a sidebar that aren't the side nav. And one of the things that you can put in there is a vertical jump links. And Jumplinks has also been changed to be responsive. So it looks something like this, and you can switch between vertical and horizontal, and the responsive behavior is a little different. So if you're vertical, the responsive behavior is to become horizontal and to be sticky to the top like this, and then you can expand it and put different headings. And the default behavior, which I don't know if it's what everyone wants, but it's what was easiest to code, the jumping to the correct heading, is that it closes whenever you jump to it. So something tricky with this is figuring out like the offset. So this part up here is sticky. So really, if you were to just like save this element or this heading and then do dot scroll into view, it'd end up like all the way up here. So you have to pass it at offset for the height of the scrollable container versus where the element you're trying to scroll to is. So that's something tricky. And in the horizontal variation, I'll show you what the responsiveness looks like. So it's always horizontal. You can click around, and then you shrink it. Again, it does this deal. Yeah, in this variation here, you can tell the offset isn't quite right because this this thing up here is thicker. So we get this behavior, which is what I was trying to warn you about. So if you were going to use this, you'd have to set a different offset. And I believe I have one more thing to show you. Yeah, this Jumplinks is full of caveats. If you have problems implementing it, just talk to me, and I'll tell you that, yeah, you're probably missing, one of 3 things. I tried to include it up here, like the main difficulties that you might have. So on to card, I created this example so you can play around with modifiers, and I believe the is rounded and is large are what were added this sprint. So if you look very carefully at this corner, when you click is rounded, it is actually rounded. It's very difficult to tell if you're not zoomed in all the way. The more useful one you might find is this this is large, which just increases the size of the text inside. That's it for me. Hopefully you guys didn't hear the crying dog too much. Is Blue Jeans doing a good job with the voice?
Yeah, with canceling out background noise, it is.
Perfect.
I'm impressed.
If only I
Okay.
could do that.
Next is Jessie.
Hey guys, let me share my screen. So I just have a couple updates to share with you guys. One of them is about our table demos. We basically realized that in some cases you might actually want to be able to click on the label instead of just the input. So all you have to do is wrap this in a label, and so we have that in our column management example, so that if I click on these, it will also work as the inputs. That request came in, and while we were working on that, we also realized that you might want to have more control over your columns with tables, and so we should have an example of how to do that. So we added draggable with your columns. So you can kind of customize a little more, and I can pull things up and change them and use that draggable data list and see that reflected in the table. So those are just some quick updates we made to the table demos. And then on top of those changes, we also made some accessibility changes, some updates. One of the things we noticed could be a potential error was with Tooltip. Basically, when you have a tooltip, it adds to the very end of your DOM. And we have it add an aria described by to the span so that it can point to that. So basically, the screen reader needs something to tell it what the tooltip is. And when we were adding that, it wasn't actually disappearing, but the tooltip was disappearing. So if you're using tooling or automation to check your work, it would come up with an error because it's pointing to something that doesn't actually exist when the tooltip's not there. So as you can see, this actually disappears when it's no longer there. So that can keep you from having any accessibility errors. And then another one that we added is adding a warning when a title or aria label is not present. When you have a progress component, if you don't have a title and you don't have an aria label, this will be very confusing to a screen reader or someone who doesn't have sight. They have no idea what this is really showing. So we wanted to make sure that users actually supply a title or some kind of label to actually show that for users. So it's just a basic warning to let them know, hey, you need to add something to kind of indicate what this means. And there's also another PR open for progress to add additional aria customization, so that'll be out soon too. But just a couple quick updates to let you guys know what's going on there.
Thank you. Our next updates are going to come from design. So first up is Michael Saldonia, I believe.
Yes. Okay. So I've shared this a bit before. Yep, so I'm going to try to go through this really quickly. There's quite a lot here, and I would definitely encourage you to look at the Marvel link that I have, which I'm going to run through here. It's in the slide deck and the agenda as well. But there's a lot to cover, so I'm just going to go over it really high level. So, oh, and there have been some improvements since the last time I've shared this, so I'm going to touch on those as well. So the first thing with topology and defining a topology design is nodes. So just defining what nodes look like and how they're laid out. Each node is comprised of an actual node, a visual node itself, which can contain an image or an icon and a label. And one recent improvement we've made is an actions menu, which we're appending to the label because we feel as though actions per node are important enough to be generally surfaced at this level. Just going through different styling statuses, for example, which align with our current statuses that we provide through PatternFly, how they work with labels, so on and so forth. This is kind of a whole page dedicated to the new node actions interaction that I was talking about before, where you can get this actions menu by clicking on the button appended to the label. And there are also other ways we think it'd be nice for a right click to trigger this per node for a very quick one. And also when you're looking at the details panel, when you have a node selected, the actions menu would appear there as well, just to ensure that we're covering the bases there. Node groups are a really big concept, so they can be many times nodes exist in a group and groups within groups, so on and so forth, and they can be in either a collapsed or an expanded state. So defining what those look like. Node groups have an inverted label styling from regular nodes just to make them very apparent, especially in more busy layouts. It can be really important to distinguish between a node group and a regular node. We've also added this expand and collapse action to the label as well, because we wanted that to have an additional, more obvious action. We also think doing something like double clicking on the node group could do the same thing. When node groups are expanded, they need to be interactable. And as I said before, we can have groups within groups. So we actually we alternate between two background styling for the groups to differentiate between them a little bit, which you can kind of see in this really tight little mock-up here. However, they each have the same hover selected and drag target state. And just to show a little proof of concept here, we've got a group within a group. I hover over the parent group here in the second middle option. Then I just hover over the other group, so you can kind of get a sense of how that feels. And then I've go back to select the major group, and it gets the selected state. Another thing we're thinking about more recently is showing like a preview of node groups while they're in their collapsed state. So potentially utilizing the popover component to provide maybe either a list of the contents or some kind of like summarized view. But we're thinking maybe hovering over the expand action could be good for that, but still not totally certain on that interaction, but it's something we're thinking about. Connectors are literally the lines which connect nodes to visualize their relationships. These are really important. So generally they connect to the centers of the nodes, but they can also connect to other parts of the node, like the label or what we're calling decorators, which are these little actions on each node. We're playing around with the idea of having different types of lines, using dashed lines to communicate different things, or at least offering them as defaults. They're also interactable, so they need to have a hover and a selected state. Terminals on those connectors can also provide a lot of valuable information. So, for example, an arrow to show directionality, or some other kind of status symbol or any icon. We really want to provide some good defaults there to communicate whatever needs to be communicated, as well as tags on each label to show a little snippet of information. In this case, it's the rate of data transfer. So creating a new connection is a big interaction we want to focus on. So when you hover over a node, if it's eligible for a new connection, you get a little arrow that points out here, and you can hover over it. I'm sorry if this is really small. I just realized I'm not zoomed in, but when you click and drag that, if you're clicking and dragging over an empty space, it turns into a plus icon to create a new node, or you can click and drag over an eligible node to create a new connection. Ineligible nodes, as soon as you initiate this interaction, any node that's not eligible for a connection with the node that you're using gets faded back, as you can see here, to imply that you can't make a connection there. So another thing I wanted to do was kind of bring it all together in a mock-up, and I plan on using this format to kind of go through all the different interactions that I've outlined. But for now, I'm just showing things like hover states. So here I hover over this node right here, and it's truncated. So it currently, when you hover over a truncated item, it shows the full name. And I select it, and I get my selection panel here, and with all the details. Then I hover over this group, back and forth, hover over the group, select it, and my side panel changes to my current selection. And that's pretty much it. Like I said, there's a lot more detail to this that I couldn't go over today just in the interest of time. So definitely check out the design doc here, and feel free to reach out with any questions.
Next design updates coming from Mary. Hi, Mary.
Hey. Let me share. Are you seeing my screen?
We are.
Okay, cool. So I just wanted to give a quick update on where we're at with labels. So we made a few updates recently to support better accessibility of these. We had been given what I'm kind of trying to find over here. Here we go. We had realized that our current design, or until really recently, design of labels really didn't support use over our gray background. So if you remember what we had previously, we had these, it was mostly the heavy or like filled in colored labels that they didn't have any outline. So especially when we were looking at the gray label, there proved no difference. You couldn't see the label background at all over gray. And that was kind of problematic. So we kind of took it as an opportunity to update a few things that really, could have been better. So the first thing that we want to tackle was that gray on gray issue. So what we did to make that work was to have all of the labels, even the solid colored filled in ones, also have a slight outline around them that's in the color that the label is, but just with like a slight darkened tone of it. So now they look like this. We did also, with the gray one, I believe, go one shade of gray lighter than what we had before, so that even without the outline, there's still a little bit of difference between the background and between background gray and the background of the label. So with that, with adding those outlines to the solid version, excuse me, we realized that maybe now there needed to be a bit more differentiation between the light or the outline version that we previously had and the heavy, because previously our light labels had a colored outline, and we figured now if we're adding that to the solid as well, that maybe they needed to be a little bit more different. So now, to make for a really clean, consistent look, all the light labels have a gray outline, but then we went with brighter shades of the color, of the given colors, as the actual text. So they look pretty cool together. So you can see on this example how they all display correctly depending on what background you're on. And these are live on the site now, so you can check them out. Some new hover effects as well, where instead of having the outline color change, it just gets thicker. So that's cool. And yeah, are there any questions on label designs?
Mary, I just wanted to interject a comment here. So one of the reasons we wanted Mary to present this again and kind of walk through the rationale. So just as a fair warning, because we added the outline to the filled labels, if you have customized labels on a project, when you install the latest release, you might want to just go and check and make sure your customizations are still okay, because again, we did add that extra border into the filled label that didn't exist before. So we want to just make sure that people had a heads up on that. Again, if you haven't done any customizations, then this should just work smoothly out of the box.
Thank you so much. And our third design update is going to come from Marie.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Hope that you can see it. Can you see it?
We can.
Oh, I don't see the slides. This is funny.
Let me see if I can.
Do you see my slide? Because I don't.
Slide number are you looking at?
23.
You see it. I can see it.
Okay, I will leave it as it is. Yeah. Okay, I just want to share a quick update on our design kit. We've updated the labels in a symbol library, so every label should have an outline. And within that, we've added new labels examples to our template. So thank you so much, Mary. Then we updated the code editor, so it should match with the current implementation. And when it comes to a data list, you can create a draggable rows and find some examples in a template file. And the next thing is that we've added underlined links. You can find them under field labels in the form section, and you can use them for showing more information in the popover. And the last thing from a symbol library is that we've added option to have a gray inline drawer. You can use it, for example, in a Whistler. And last but not least, you can find Jumplinks in a symbol library and a template file. And that's all for me.
Thank you. One big update from the core team. Michael Coker will present that. Good luck.
Thanks. Let's see what I can do in record time here. I'm going to try and share just a browser. Are you seeing the slides?
See your core update slide.
Okay, great. Okay, so up first, the drop-down component. You can currently align the menu to the left or the right, depending on where your drop-down is and how you want that to come out. But we added an enhancement where you can adjust that alignment responsively. And so on a small screen, if your drop-down's like on a certain part of the page, you can say align right. But on a large screen, when it's not in that part of the page, it doesn't make sense to align right anymore. You can align left. And so you can change that at all of our breakpoints if you wanted to go back and forth at each one of them. So, and then up next, in our new menu component, we have a drill down feature that already exists, and we have added breadcrumb navigation to that. So if you have 15 levels of drill down or whatever, you can now get a breadcrumb navigation across the top that allows you to navigate back up the tree in any of the ancestor levels in that drill down menu. And then next, with the form component, currently our where you specify your form control elements for a given form group, it's really only set up to take a single form control element, so like a text input or text area or whatever, at a time. You just put one in there, or if you wanted to put multiple, you'd need to place a layout inside of there and like manage the spacing of multiple elements. So now we just have a stacked modifier that you can apply to a form control group that allows you just to place multiple form controls inside of it. So here I have a couple of text inputs, and then in another form group, I've got a couple of checkbox components. And you don't have to place a layout inside of the control or inside of the form group anymore. You just say it's a stacked variant, and it will assume that any multiple items should just be stacked on top of one another with the appropriate amount of spacing. And then up next, some updates to the list component. It's a pretty simple component, doesn't get much update or many updates, so this is pretty exciting. You can now specify a bordered variation for it, so just create little horizontal rules between the items inside of the list. And then we have icon variation as well, that there are two variants to the icon variation, and so you can use regular small icons and then also large icons, and everything aligns and does what it's supposed to. So I can't really demo this. It wouldn't be visible over blue jeans here, but the horizontal navigation component. So we have two variations of horizontal navigation. It's the main horizontal navigation that goes in the masthead, and then also the tertiary navigation that would go like in the content area. We've added just subtle CSS scroll snapping to those, and then also for the horizontal tabs as well, so that when you scroll through those horizontal lists, the element on the right just snaps to the right edge of the container. So hopefully it's pretty subtle, non-intrusive, and then just helps keep the visible portion of the elements that you're scrolling to within bounds of the overflow container. And then this is just kind of a housekeeping sort of thing. We renamed the touchspin component to number input. That seems a lot more apt for what that component does. And so in core, it's PFC touchspin became PFC number input, and then on the React side, it's the touchspin component becomes number input, as you would expect. With the wizard component, we've added special spacing for the destructive cancel action. And so now you can see this in the demo here. You just get a little extra space between your main actions, whatever those are, and then the destructive cancel action. In the description list component, we now support a different way of displaying help or like tooltip and popover text. Traditionally, you can add a little help icon to description list and forms by the label in a form or the term text in a description list. But if every term that you have in your description list has help. Having an icon on every single one of those can be a little distracting. And so this is a different presentation. It's a dashed underline for the term text, and this will, on interacting with it, you get a popover that you can display more information in, and then put standard popover content inside of that. Also with the description list, similar to the drop-down update I mentioned, where you can switch between left and right alignment at different breakpoints. Well, now you can switch between horizontal and vertical layout of your term and definition or description in the description list at different breakpoints. And so you can, on a small screen, have vertical, medium screen, horizontal, large screen, vertical, extra large screen, horizontal. And then, oh no. See. Oh, okay, great. And up next in the login component, the login form now supports a hide and show password feature. So basically the password field just becomes an input group with an action. Well, with these icons, then you can click on the action and it will show your password and hide it. And then we now have a much anticipated new masthead component that we're creating to give a lot more flexibility, cooler layout, much easier to use structure or framework for everything that goes in the masthead of the current page component. And so we've been working on this one for a while, and we're continuing to work on it as we finish the layout and the elements and things that go inside of it. But you can see the framework for that up in the core workspace now as the masthead component. So that's really good. And in an effort to build out more composable drop-down-esque menus, so like drop-downs and option menus and application launchers, they're all pretty similar separate components. The menu component that I mentioned previously, that's one element of it. So we have this kind of agnostic menu that can be used to pop up where you want when you click on something or whatever. Now we also have a menu toggle component. So you'll see that in the core workspace as well. And so this is sort of a generic set of toggles that you can use to then pop up a menu and sort of populate that menu with what you want. So we've built out a bunch of first variations of the menu toggle. These are some of the states and variations that we have in place. We'll continue to work on that to support different types of toggles that you might want to associate with a menu. And again, doesn't really present well, but in the radio and checkbox components, previously these components were set up to only really support, without breaking the layout, both a radio and checkbox label pair. So you have the input and the label. There are lots of options you can do with those two things, but you couldn't just have a standalone input. And there are a lot of cases where you have an external label that you want to use that's not directly associated with, like, right beside of the radio or the checkbox, or you just have an instance like, say, in say radio select table rows, for example, where you just want to have an input, and maybe the first column in the table, for example, serves as a label for the input. So now these components allow you to just specify the input by itself. And so this has been implemented in some of our beta components. It's also an option that you can just use in your own custom use of radio and checkbox. In places like table, for example, where we do have standalone inputs currently, but they're not the radio and checkbox because we didn't support the standalone layout. Those are left alone, so as not to introduce any sort of disruptive changes. But at some point in the future, when we can introduce that kind of change, we'll likely implement the standalone variation in those existing components, so that we have normalization of input elements, radios and checks across our components. In the table layout, so we have this really cool, just in the existing table component, we now have a table tree layout. And so it's just kind of as you'd expect. You have expandable, nestable, aligned tree layout inside of the table. Support handful of options. You can go and check it out in the core workspace under the table for icons and with and without checkboxes and that sort of thing. So, and in the tabs component, similar to what Zack demoed with the jump links, to where they're responsive, and at a certain point you can collapse your vertical jump links into a toggle that then allows you to toggle that responsively. And that sidebar component that Zack also mentioned, vertical tabs have the same feature. So these can become expandable, where you just have a toggle, and then you can expand that toggle into your list of vertical tabs. And looks like that's it. Were there any questions?
Lots of chatter in the chat, but I don't think it's about your design core updates. So I think you're set.
Okay.
The next update is a social media update from Alana.
Thanks, Nicole. Let me share my screen. And in the interest of time, I'm going to do just a general drill down. I invite everyone to click into the slides if they'd like to go into more of the numbers. But we're 2 months into 2021, so I felt it might be a good time to share the progress we've made across our social media channels so far. So it's a new year, and we've seen a lot of new growth, as I mentioned before. So let's dive into what that looks like for us. The first channel we'll explore is PatternFly Medium, which is the blog platform we use to share stories across PatternFly specific content and thought leadership across open source and UX. So the main takeaway is that we've had a slow and steady rise of followers ever since we've started. So we have 170 followers as of February, which is 14 more than last month. And our average views and minutes read per month have grown by 554 minutes and 600 minutes respectively. And our article topics have maintained a balance between PatternFly specific content and thought leadership across open source and UX. And that animation to the right just shows our most recent article topics spanning case studies specific to PatternFly components and Red Hat products, all the way over into general UX strategies and other overarching conversations. Then we'll move to PatternFly Twitter, which is what I like to call our open source drawing room. So it's where we go for short form content exchanges. There we have 928 followers, which is 26 more than last month. And our impressions and profile visits are up pretty substantially over the course of February. Average engagement rate is up 0.5% to 2.5%. We have 27 retweets from our content and 21 mentions this month. So it's very cool to see how PatternFly is showing up in conversations across the web and being able to quantify that through these metrics. We were featured on the Red Hat blog back in January about the very social media strategy that we're talking about now. So I wrote an article about tactics open source communities like PatternFly can use to build their Twitter communities. And people took notice, so we saw a lot of retweets and call-outs about the article, both from Red Hatters and from PatternFly users across the web. And the article was featured in Red Hat's Friday 5 curation, and from that feature, we were noticed by someone named Eric, who hosts a podcast called Pseudo Show. So I'm excited to announce that we've been invited to share our PatternFly story with Pseudo Show, which is a podcast about enterprise open source tech, methodologies, and culture. So in March, we'll be connecting with their hosts to talk about all things PatternFly, not only our social media strategy, but also our origin, what we do, why we do it, and how our work impacts users across the web. So here's to engaging, empowering, and inspiring one another, one like, comment, and story at a time. Speaking of stories, we'd love to share yours. PatternFly Medium is accepting topic submissions on a rolling basis, so if you'd like to write about something, we'd love to hear it. And if you don't want to write, but there's a topic, question, or concept you'd like to see featured, feel free to reach out to the content team because we'd love to explore how to share that across our blogging platform. And also, if you're not following us, feel free to follow us on medium.com/patternfly or @patternfly on Twitter. And just a brief call out, Kevin and I are leading a documentation effort across our component design guidelines. So this effort is aiming to answer two fundamental questions. How do you use PatternFly component design guidelines, and how can we best tailor those resources to you and your work? So we're in the beginning stages of this project. Right now we're just gauging flyer interest, but in the coming weeks we're excited to be rolling out some recruitment measures for workshops and other ways that you can get involved in defining key areas we'd like to improve and key action items going forward. Thanks, everyone.
Very exciting. Exciting. All right. And the last update we have is from Matt Carano. General update on what we are working on.
Thanks, Nicole. Yeah, let me share my screen out, and I just want to give a there we go. Just a quick update on things that are work that's currently in progress within the different teams. So the design team is currently working on, or at least this is a subset of things that the design team is currently working on. We're reworking our horizontal secondary navigation. In the future, we expect to have a restyled secondary navigation bar, which can be used as an alternative to the existing tab style tertiary navigation. We've been doing work in the background on a PatternFly dark theme. Animation, there's a small team that's been working on looking at adding animation to PatternFly components. Also looking at doing an implementation of catalog view, doing a lot of work on filters, both from in terms of optimizing some of our components to better work with filtering, and also doing reworking our documentation of filtering, and some enhancements to Wizard to support collapsible substeps and a optional skip to finish button. There's a link here to the PatternFly design workspace where you can see everything that's in our design backlog and what's currently being worked on. If you want to drill into more details. The core HTML CSS team is actually the updated label visuals are done. We talked about that earlier. But we will also be working on an auto-sized text area where the text area will automatically resize to its content. Working on some Masthead refactoring. I think Michael Coker might have mentioned the new Masthead component that we recently introduced, and we will be continuing to do more work in that area. Actually, I guess some of these things are actually on this list have been completed, so maybe it's a little bit of a stale list, but the underlined labels, I think, was mentioned in Michael Coker's demo, and then we're also working on enhancements to the radio button component to make it easier to nest controls within a radio button group. And on the React side, we have a collaboration with OpenShift and the Cloud Platform team working on introducing a log viewer. In the coming release, we hope to introduce a drill down menu component as well as a tree table. The show hide password that Michael Coker showed in his core demo should be available from React in our next release, as well as expandable field groups. And you can always visit our, GitHub project board where you can see kind of in detail what we have planned for future releases, and this plan is headed about 6 months out. The probably the nearer term plans are a little bit more accurate, but you can kind of see what's on our horizon. So any questions about anything here? Okay, so as mentioned earlier, we love it when we're able to collaborate with our consumers and our stakeholders. So if you have current needs for any of these components and want to reach out to us, we'd be happy to share with you more details of what we're working on. All of these items in the slide deck are linked to existing active issues, so you can also drill in and follow those issues and the subsequent PRs that are there. So please feel free to engage with that. Okay, I think that's it for me. Hand it back to you, Nicole.
Yeah, I thank you so much. I definitely will send out the slides with all the links shortly after the meeting is posted to YouTube so that you can reference them, access all of the issues and forms and links talked about today. And feel free to reach out to me if you have any more questions. We don't really have a ton of time for more. I see Andre asking about who is working on dark theme. And so there is the issue, I think, right? The design issue about dark theme is linked in the slides.
Yeah, so it's primarily myself and Michael Saldonia and Michael Coker, along with and Marie Dorshkova on our Renault team. So Andre, feel free to send a message on our Slack channel and we could communicate more about that.
Yeah, that would be a very quick way to get a response, I think, Slack. Okay, well, we're out of time, so I'm not going to take any more questions right now. But thank you, everybody, and keep your eye out for the email. And it was awesome to hear from all the teams. Thank you.